people confuse their why with the result. If you say my why for doing this is to monetize, no, monetize is the result of the work you do. It is not the why, right? And I think that's the first barrier, is not having clarity around and distinction between the results of the work that you're going to do and the why behind it.
Welcome, everybody. Today, I'm extremely excited to have Lee Silverstein with us to talk about your why, your career, and your life. He has a very powerful story, really inspirational speaker, and I'm really excited to have him here. Thanks so much for joining us today, Lee.
Thanks for having me, Wade. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I had heard about you, and I got to hear you speak about 5-6 months ago at Podfest Origins. Was really just blown away by your talk about why and purpose. And maybe if you could just share a little bit with the audience, a little bit about how that became important to you and how that's something that you use in your day-to-day as you work with people in the work you do.
Sure. You know, it started kind of in tandem with when, like yourself, Wade, I became a podcaster. And this goes back to 2015. And prior to that, 11 years ago, almost to the day, I received a cancer diagnosis. After a routine colonoscopy, I turned 50. My doctor says, "Oh, you're 50. Guess what you get to do?" So I was like, yeah, I heard that I should be getting a colonoscopy. So I went and did that and basically woke up to find out that I had cancer. And a few months later, found out that that was stage 4 cancer. And so, kind of immersed myself in the cancer world as an adult. I'm also a survivor of pediatric cancer when I was a little kid, but that's a story for another day. And had several friends in the podcasting community, many of them who through Podfest. And I attended a local Florida Podcast Association meeting just out of curiosity, really. I hadn't been much of a podcast listener or follower. And at that meeting, it was one of those, what we like to call those lightning bolt moments, right? When that idea just strikes you. And I was like, gee, maybe I could start a podcast talking to fellow patients and caregivers and survivors like myself as a way to kind of share the human side of the cancer experience. And it was Katie Kremitzos, Chris Kremitzos, who's the founder of Podfest, his wife, who said, "Oh my God, you need to go do this." And the why came to me immediately. As I did some quick research, Wade, and found there really weren't any non-clinical cancer podcasts out there at the time. Again, we're going back to 2015. And I said, let me just talk to people and let them share their stories. And it didn't take more than a couple of days for the tagline, which really became my why statement, and that to come to me. And that was to provide information, inspiration, and hope to those touched by cancer. And I spent 7 years interviewing people across all patients, caregivers, medical folks, doctors, etc. Almost 200 episodes as part of the We Have Cancer podcast. And we're on a hiatus right now in terms of new episodes, but anybody looking for any information, and the whole back catalog is out there. But that was always my why. That was going to be my beacon, to provide information, inspiration, and hope. And it was quickly validated when I received emails and feedback from people with those exact words back to me. And that's how you know your why, you've hit the bullseye, is when people say, "Oh, you inspired me. You gave me hope," right? So these words that I came up with as the tagline to the show were being used back at me. And that's how I knew that, I was onto something.
Wow. There's so many things here. I want to start with one thing is this whole concept of the why, you and I have been around long enough. We've heard it referred to as your mission, your vision, your purpose statement. There's, it's been called all these different things over the years, and sometimes in corporate settings or personal settings and all these different things. And it can be minimalized or trivialized because it's done so many times. It's kind of like when you hear, wisdom, like a stitch in time saves nine. Oh yeah, okay, great, sure. And like, no, there's a reason they say that, or, waste not, want not, or whatever it might be. I think these are some things my parents have taught me. And the why piece to me, I know, at least I feel Simon Sinek has done it justice in the work he's done and sort of revived that conversation. But it becomes very, I think for a lot of people, intangible, hard to get a sense of, okay, well, how do I live this? Can I monetize this? Should I monetize this? Just in that overall generic sense, and we'll go a little deeper, but when you first talk with people, and I'm sure you see people at seminars, they get excited about their why. What do you find that are some of the blocks people have when they say, yeah, but I'm excited about my why, but it seems to be way over here and my job's over in left field over here. And can I live my why, or do I have to make money at it? What are some of the things that you find that maybe people struggle with, that maybe a little shift in their perspective might help them connect to that better?
You brought up Simon Sinek, and I too am a big fan, and he stated it pretty well in his well-known TED Talk that coincided with his book Start With Why, where he talked about, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, where people confuse their why with the result. If you say my why for doing this is to monetize, no, monetize is the result of the work you do. It is not the why, right? And I think that's the first barrier, is not having clarity around and distinction between the results of the work that you're going to do and the why behind it. And I'm of the belief that if you are true to and treat your why as kind of your beacon, to everything you do, and it's not just words, but it's really what you run everything through that filter. Does this align with why we're doing what we're doing? And you stick to it with consistency, then the results that you hope will come from that will in due time indeed come from it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think of something, I hope I'm saying the right person. I think it was Lisa Sasevich. I heard a talk in one of Joe Polish's Genius Network events. I'd bought the recordings from it, and she used the term your through line. And what she said was, she asked a question, if you are on an island and you were never going to see, humanity again, but you could give them one message, like a phrase or, 2 sentences or something, what would it be? And in my case, there's a book I've written called Put Your Money Where Your Soul Is, which is about people spending their time with the people they love most, doing activities they love, just enjoying life, that sort of stuff. And that kept coming up for me. And it was a book I've written 20 years ago. I published it maybe 15 years ago. The print on demand wasn't there 20 years ago, and I wasn't about to do the whole Wayne Dyer drive the whole country thing. I love him. I just wasn't up for the task. It was like I kind of almost knew too much. But long story short, what she said was that theme should be indifferent in all parts of your life. Like bring that, because if that's your thing, that you bring that in. And her concept was, okay, it's not always going to monetize, but if you're bringing it everywhere, that's something that is going to be something that's maybe almost like your special sauce that people can't maybe even put their finger on. And it might be how you do it, even though you might be in a job that on LinkedIn or whatever, it says, oh, what are you? I'm a sales guy. I'm an insurance guy, or whatever it is that seems very vanilla, but bringing your why to it brings something else that doesn't necessarily, that just is unique to you. So maybe if you could give an example for the people listening, what does it look like for you, what's it look like when you're bringing your why to different dimensions, to your personal life, to inspiring people, to your work perhaps? How does that look perhaps slightly different and yet still have that same theme where you could look at it and say, yeah, well, that's my why. In case y'all didn't realize, that's it right there.
Sure. What a great question, Wade. So in my full-time job, I work as a career coach. I work for a global corporation, helping people who've been downsized, restructured, laid off, pick your euphemism, for losing your job, and help them not as a recruiter, but giving them the tools and the skills they need to successfully get back into the workforce. And this is through coaching and more tangible things like how to create a LinkedIn profile and a resume and those kinds of things. But to your point, that why information, inspiration, and hope isn't just part of the We Have Cancer podcast. I use that in my regular job, and people say, you know what, you think about what are some of the tough things people face in life. Certainly, a health challenge is near the top of the list. Losing a job happens to also be in the top 5 too, right? So there's a lot there. And when I can coach and work with these executives and also work to give them hope, right? Say, look, I know you were in this job for 30 years. The next opportunity, and maybe even a better opportunity, is out there for you. Don't look back, because that's not where you're going. Yes, I know you didn't see this coming, and it's devastating to lose a job after many years if that's the case. But let me tell you, there is hope, and let me do what I can to inspire you here. So there aren't lines between, oh, I'm only providing information, inspiration, and hope when I'm behind the microphone. But in day-to-day life, or in any of the online cancer support groups, when I can share my story, and I always get the same thing back, wow, you inspired me, right? So it is, and can be, if you so choose. Doesn't need to be just something you do from, quote unquote 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. If your why is part of how you live your life, as you said, you do as well, it works everywhere. It really does.
That's so cool. I remember something I love from the book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Yeah, Dan Millman's book. And in that book, the lead character, the main character focus is a gymnast, Dan Millman. It's semi-autobiographical, I believe, if I remember correctly. And he has this mentor that teaches him how to live better and just be more focused in life, more present in different things. And so towards the end of the book, sorry, spoiler alert if anybody just, you missed this part, but it's not a huge thing, but yet it is he says to his mentor, okay, so am I supposed to now open the school where I mentor people on this? He's like, no, teach people gymnastics. He says, and every once in a while you'll meet somebody that's also open to receiving this deeper thing, or this, other thing you have to offer. And I just find that so wise, because it's that grounding, the chop wood, carry water, the like, okay, yes, you're gonna go save the world. Like when I told my mom I'm going to India to save the world when I was 22, because all these people just wanted money in the corporate world. She's like, wait, help the people where you're at, make some money. If you want, go take a trip to India. And I was like, no, but this is like, that young sort of adolescent view of,
sure,
I have to go somewhere else and it's got to be dramatic. And she's like, no, just work, do your work, which actually is less perhaps even fun sometimes. Like, no, just get off your butt, do your work, help the people. I was working in insurance claims in the bodily injury section. So a similar kind of situation, people coming in, they've just been in a car accident, they're hurt, they're feeling like they're going to be taken advantage of. And my mom knew all the questions to ask. She's like, so all this is going on, right? They probably need somebody to help them. Yeah, she's like, great, get your butt back in there, go help those people. And if you want, go fly to India, but you don't need to go to India to help people, which I think was something that in a more immature, or just, again, this grandiose way was yes, what I wanted to do.
Sure.
Probably in a little ways, I kind of just wanted to, get out of the routine, so to speak.
Yeah. And, you don't need to, please don't follow my lead and get cancer to feel that that's the way to do this. You can be in sales, you can be in insurance, you can be in any industry and still have that impact, right? As long as, where you're working and their values align with yours, it's all that we talk about why, it's also part of the how. It's also how you treat people. So if you're in bodily injury claims and you treat people with compassion and, and tell them, hey, you're in a tough situation, but, there's hope on the other side. Again, you don't have to, it's industry agnostic, if I would find a way to put it. it's also part of not just your why, but your how.
Absolutely. So when you work with people, you do is just career coaching and just in general in life, what would you say it looks like? So if a person's listening to this right now and they're thinking, I wonder if I'm connected with my why. 'Cause it's almost like one of those things, like, I don't know, like being part of the cool club. Like, do I have this? Am I connected to my why? Just am I hip? What does it look like? If this person's just kind of thinking about their life, what does it look like or feel like? Or what do those moments look like when a person is connected? Or what would a person be feeling, let's say, if they're not connected? Because sometimes we might have a job we don't like and it might be hard work and it might or might not be connected to our why. But how would a person understand that, okay, maybe, you know what, I'm missing this. I'm not even connected to this. And then if they can connect to that, what does it then look like to start bringing that into their life in simple ways?
Part of it comes from the feedback you get from the other side, whoever you're interacting with, those little comments, and they don't always come. But, when someone says, you helped me, thank you, you made a difference. You helped me see something I couldn't see. Those kinds of things are kind of the test, if you will, if you're heading in the right direction. And I also got to tell you, it takes work. It's not easy. You talked about my presentation at Podfest Origins, fall of 2021. And I shared a story, one that will stay with me for the rest of my life, where, Wade, I admitted I lost track of my why. And I'll share the story here. One of the challenges of immersing yourself in the cancer world and you start building relationships is, no surprise, you're going to lose people that you're close to. And when you start working in advocacy groups and awareness, this happens. And I've lost count, but of the close to 200 episodes that I did on the podcast, I think about 20 of those guests are not with us any longer. And that's hard. And what happened a couple of years back, a friend of mine in the colon cancer community, I want to be real. This wasn't a dear friend who I talked to every week, but she was a friend and someone I was close to and lost touch with for a few months. And I go on social media and I see that Sarah had passed away. And it just hit me like a truck. And I'm sitting with my wife as I'm scrolling through my phone and I just burst into tears. And I kid you not, I threw my phone across the room. And I looked at her with tears coming out of my eyes and I said, I can't do it anymore. I can't do this anymore. It's too hard. And she's like, look, don't make any rash decisions. We had made plans. I think the next day, we were still deep in the midst of COVID, but we had rented an Airbnb at the beach, kind of seclusive to be on the beach, but be safe. And I said, all right. So next day we get in the car, we drive up to the beach for a few days. And I think the next day I'm just happened to look at some emails on my phone and I see an email from a total stranger. And it's a woman sending me an email saying, I want to thank you. I found your podcast. I recently got into a relationship with someone who was recently diagnosed with cancer, and I didn't know the questions to ask and how to help. And I found your podcast, and you made all the difference to me. So I read this email 48 hours after I learned that Sarah passed. And again, I burst into tears, and I'm not embarrassed to say, I'm an emotional guy. And it was that email. And I don't believe in coincidences, Wade. I think things happen when they're supposed to happen for you. It was that email that reminded me when I threw my phone across the room. And yeah, I had the right to be upset when you lose someone, but at that moment, I'd lost track of my why because I was making it about me. And then I get this email from this woman saying, you don't know who I am. You've never heard of me, yet you made a difference in my life. And I immediately responded to her again through tears telling her the backstory, that I was ready to hang this thing up at the time. And then I got her email reminding me of my tagline, information, inspiration, and hope, that got me back on track. So it's
Wow.
hard. It's hard. Even when you're as dedicated as you are, this is my why, this is my beacon, everything runs through my why. Staying with it, and being distracted by the money or the downloads or other circumstances, it's easy to get off track. And then you get that kind of wake up call that says, whoops, I lost track there for a minute. And so I dusted myself off and went on to keep recording,
That is, wow, that's so awesome. And the crazy thing is, well, not the crazy thing, this as a podcaster, I've had at least 2 or 3 times where I was like, okay, because I've been doing mine for about 4 years, coming on my 5th year, and I'm looking for the positive. I'm delightfully inconsistently. So I come in and out in waves. They have the term, if you're not a podcast, they have the term called pod fade, which basically means you weren't consistent, darn it. You didn't stay on. So I'll come in and out and I use the excuse, well, you see, I'm a lifestyle guy. And so, when it's interfering with my lifestyle. But long story short, I've had a few times where, like you're saying, podcasting for the most part, I mean, there's a few people, the Joe Rogans and people that are making a significant financial gain from it. And even he didn't start with that. He got to where he did. He earned his way to that. But a lot of times along the way, if you're just looking for the money or just even looking for validation through downloads, you're not always going to get it. And recently is crazy. My wife told me about a family friend of hers. I said, I just want you to let Wade know that I'm listening to his podcast and it's a big deal. And it was one of those things where, if you ever think we're not wired beyond just the material, I mean, and it wasn't an ego thing because I have plenty of things. I'm 50. There's things I can brag about or not brag about. It wasn't an ego thing. It was like something I needed to hear because it was kind of getting like, okay, well, I'm doing this. I don't always hear back. I've not done a lot of monetization in my case with my coaching. But I have a handful of people that have said, wait, this has like made a huge difference. One of my best friends came to one of the events that I did and he like shifted this whole thing. Now he did the work, but I was part of that impetus. And so it can be very difficult, at least sometimes, when something that I feel is so much a part of my purpose doesn't monetize. And meanwhile, over here's my coaching business and insurance. I happen to think is an awesome field when it's done right. So in that field, and that the money keeps coming in and it's steady and it's good and it's solid. And I give it a little of attention and it goes really well. But I'm like, yeah, but I want my purpose to be over here. And it's like almost this specific sense. And yet, I guess like most things, that whole idea of the person you want to be leader is the person who doesn't want to be the leader, where it's like not the person like, well, I want to be the leader because see, I've got the leader jacket and I've got the hat. So that's been something that's been interesting to me. And what have you comment on this? So I've heard people say that, what you would do if you had all the money in the bank, that's your why. And I've always felt that, no, that's your ideal lifestyle because I wouldn't necessarily serve the world. I'd hang out. For me, the why has, or at least parts of the why, has something more to do with what will you do even if you don't get paid? We have kids. Get up in the middle of the night, change the diaper, grab the poop right out of the toilet with a bare hand and throw, because, whatever, I mean, those are the things. And it feels like that the why is a little more almost elusive or subtle, not stealthy. It's not like it's trying to hide, but it's not so grandiose. What would you say to that?
It depends on the individual and what resonates with you, right? You got to feel it in your heart, right? It's got to feel natural. It can't be, I hear people share their why, and sometimes I feel like it's not really a why. It's something that would look good on a bumper sticker, right? And it sounds cute, but is it something you really are feeling your heart and can live and breathe and just it's the way you live your life. So I think that's one way to look at it, is is this a slogan? That's the word that came to mind. Is it a slogan, or is it truly something that when you wake up every day, this is where you want to be? This is your goal. And if you have other people on your team that everybody's aligned with it. Simon Sinek in his talks about if people are aligned with your purpose, they'll work for you for their with blood, sweat, and tears. If it's just for the money, the money will come and the money will go, and so will they, right? So you got to be honest with yourself and say, does this resonate with me? Is this something that will lead me each and every day? And if I decided to do something different, is this transferable? Right? So, for me, whether I'm podcasting or I'm not, to be able to lead a life where you want to try to inspire and give people hope, it's not a bad way to live, right? And it's not just a slogan that'll look good on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker.
I think that's what's so wise about that. I love is, and I imagine obviously you have this tied in and dialed into your, you working with people is, I think a lot of the times when I've heard people, having done a lot of personal growth seminars, there's, and entrepreneurial growth and business growth and stuff, there's this, I think, human need to, well, first of all, to want to be included, to want to feel we're getting it, to want to feel we're making progress. It feels weird to be at the motivational seminar and to not get it. And so, like you say, those slogans, I've seen people where I feel like, and again, I just sort of a sense like, okay, that's not it yet. And it wasn't that they were being fake. It wasn't that they were just like, it's this, right? I hope it's this. Like, I'm not sure. And yet I think about something that one of my friends told me when I stayed in the same industry, and she went from the insurance industry and she now works for Apple. And she's like, Wade, I want you to get your skills are transferable. And I'm hearing you say your why is transferable. And let's take that maybe even to a more practical comment. You did something before our pre-interview, which I thought was so on target. You reminded me, said, hey, wait, just in case you know or don't know, technically I work, I've been an entrepreneur. I'm an employee. And just in case your audience knows or doesn't know, in case that's a big deal. And I'd shared with you my experience that some of my friends that are entrepreneurs get so caught up on, well, am I an entrepreneur or am I not? And I like to remind people like LeBron James, Lionel Messi, they're not entrepreneurs. They might also, but they're also employees and they work dollars for hours. It's kind of crazy, just a lot of dollars. So that's not necessarily a problem. And, whether or not you have this label of entrepreneur, and you and I both, we know people that have been broke that are entrepreneurs and that are rich and vice versa. So when people get caught up in either what it should look like in their why or their career, what would you say to that person now, especially given we're right now recording this in April of 2022, there's a lot of people shifting their jobs. They're looking for better working situations. They're looking for better work-life balance. They're not sure their job might, there's a gazillion reasons why. What would you tell that person who is, maybe they're not expecting, they're saying, Lee, I'm not expecting my life to be fulfilled in every moment, but I want to do work that in some way feels aligned with what I'm up to, as opposed to just feeling like I'm going there, having to pump myself up every day. What do you tell people when they're in that shifting period, whether it's an entrepreneur looking to shift projects or focuses, or an employee looking to, or either looking to or having to switch jobs? How can they bring the combination of their skills, their skill set, their why, and how can they do that intelligently?
It's, and first I'll work backwards with it and say, you need to do that. Okay. What I mean by that is, if you're the one that's posting on social media, it's hump day and TGIF and, thank God it's the weekend, hold up the mirror. Something's wrong. Something's wrong, right? If you live for, the weekend and the next vacation, and as my son used to call it, the Sunday night scaries, meaning I'm going to bed and, oh God, I got to go to work Monday. It's time. it's time to rethink things because no one should be in that situation, especially the way the job market is today, and whether that means shifting to becoming an entrepreneur or working for another company whose culture aligns with yours. Look, I failed as an entrepreneur. I'll put it right out there. I tried doing this career coaching thing on my own and failed miserably for all kinds of reasons. Topic for another day. I'm not embarrassed by it. My personality is not cut out to be an entrepreneur. That's okay. Not everybody is. But what I'm fortunate about is I'm working for a company where I feel valued. I'm important. The work I do is meaningful. The CEO calls me to check, on my health and what do you need. And as I mentioned off air, I'm just back from a month-long medical leave. I had major surgery a month ago related to my cancer. And you know what? Not for 1 second did I have to worry about my job or work. Not because I don't care, but that's the culture that I'm in, that I didn't need to think about it, right? And not everybody's in that situation. And I'm fully aware that there are people out there. It's like, I'm battling cancer, and they said if I'm not back by next week, my job's going to be gone. And so don't wait, right? I see it too often in the work that I do, and people are in their 50s. And I said, I was at the last job for 30 years and I can't believe they let me go. And in the next 10 minutes is how miserable they were. But they're upset that they lost their job. I'm like, wait a minute. So you've been living in misery for 30 years. What are you waiting for? Right? Make a change. Find it. There's lots of jobs out there. There's lots of companies out there. Or if you feel you're cut out to go it on your own or with some other folks, do that too. Okay. 40 plus hours a week is way too flippin' long to be stressed out and miserable. All right. And you got to hold up that mirror. It's not worth it. I can, say every day, look, we all have our moments, but I don't have any work stress. I do my job. I make an impact, some days better than others. So that's where you got to start is, how do you feel when you get up in the morning getting ready to go to work? Okay. If there's fear, if there's that feeling in the pit of your stomach, dude, you got to do something.
Yeah. I think that, there's so many things, there's so many pieces to that. And first of all, if you're in a work situation where you're not appreciated, compensated well, not through the roof, but compensated well, fairly, able to enjoy a good life, good time off, and to your point, treated as an individual with respect, all those different things. I think it's so interesting to me. I believe, blessed to have a perspective of different parts of the world. My parents from the islands, my wife's from Peru. I've done a little bit of travel here and there, and even just from reading, and at least as of maybe 4 years ago or 5 years ago, when the book Factfulness was written by Hans Rosling, he mentioned the idea that 6 out of 7 people on the planet live on less than $32 a day. Now, of course, in some areas that's adjusted. Their costs of their food are not the same as ours and whatnot, but many of those people are happy. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying they wouldn't. I mean, they'd like to be earning more, but at the same time, the money isn't the only thing. And I see so many people my age that are still worried about the money. And I'm old enough to have watched enough of my friends from my high school class or just people around where like that person was 10 years younger than you. Oops, something just happened. This happened. They're gone. That happened. They died. And if nothing more, the life is short thing. And it's funny you mentioned the whole avoiding the work week thing. When I first started my podcast, I call it the 4-Day Work Week podcast, or 4-Day Work Week Entrepreneur. And I was more aligned with, I only want to work 4 days. I hadn't yet gotten to the focus on, first of all, the main focus is the 3-day weekend concept or just enjoying life. But I was so in what I don't want to do as opposed to what I want to do. And it was a very different energy, the way I approached my work and did different things. And now as I put more of a focus on, 2 things. Number one, that I really am planning my life outside of work as much as I plan my life inside of work, which, shocker, it's getting better and more enjoyable, just more fun, that sort of stuff. But then that then gives me the sense to then not resent work and realize, wow, those 3-day weekends happen because I'm doing that thing those 4 days. And yes, there are so many areas where, I'm able to be brought back in and realize, okay, I'm making a difference here, I'm making a difference there. And I just remember, just as I was working on my master's degree in psychology, a few times I saw people in the foster care system or people who'd experienced abuse and stuff, and they were there because they didn't have the right amount of insurance. It's like, oh God, you gotta be kidding me. So one of my mentors had always told us we're financial social workers in the insurance field. Like if you do it right, you're preventing people from needing government funds, GoFundMe accounts, that sort of stuff. And this was one of those things where these young kids, they had been in the foster care situation, and it can be good sometimes, and sometimes it can be not so good. In their case, it was not so good. And yet, if there was life insurance in place for the dad and disability insurance in place for the mom, that would have never happened. And so it was even one of those things where here I am again, okay, I've got to go to India. I've got to make this grandiose. It's like, no, right where you are, bring that why, that inspiration, that information, whatever your version of that is, into what you're doing. And I would imagine as you're working with people, is that something you encourage them when they're in their job search? Like how do they, in fact, so let's go to this as a question. How then can a person, if they're looking for that new job, be likely to find a culture that is going to, chances are, respond to that, as opposed to being in there after 3 months and saying, whoops, I made a wrong jump? Or how can a person identify that as they're looking to shift, perhaps?
The best way is to talk to people who are already there, right? And that's a big part of what I coach, is the importance of networking and finding your job and finding information. Companies are going to tell you what they want you to hear, right? And it's difficult. There are some signals you could possibly pick up in an interview, but the best thing is to talk to people who work there and get a feel for what life is like, and start there, right? And what's the best culture for me? It may not be the best culture for you, right? We're all different, and that's okay. But it's important to understand yourself first. What do you need? What motivates you? What inspires you? And is that a fit with where you're going to be working, right? Because to your point, last thing you want to do is take a job and 90 days later go, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into, right? So that really is the best way, is to have conversations with people.
Awesome. Wow. I'm taking in so much, and somebody said, wait, of course you expected. There's just so much. Wow. There's so much you're bringing this. I'm inspired to listen to your show more. I've not really delved into it yet. And because I guess I almost even thought, well, I don't have cancer. And of course I have friends who have cancer. I have friends. So I'm realizing, wow, I really, really need to look into this. You're pretty good at this stuff. This is funny because I brought you on. I heard you talking about, I got to have Lee on the show. And you're like, wait, what do you want to talk about? Well, I think something about the why thing, because you're really, really good at that. Awesome. So thank you for everything so far. So
My
question
pleasure.
for you, just for that person that says, okay, I want to start bringing more why, more purpose, more inspiration to my own life. How can a person just in a really simple way get started that is manageable, that like when they're done listing this, they can say, okay, I'm going to start doing this one thing or things that can help make that happen?
Great question. I will tell you, Wade, just as a backdrop to my answer, is I've not traditionally been one of these big, read 10 self-help books a week kind of guy. And a number of years back, in the course of less than a week, 3 different people mentioned the book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And I was like, that's a sign. 3 people mentioned the same, 3 random people, unconnected, mentioned the same book. Maybe I need to go read this book, which is, I don't even know if it's 100 pages. And it basically is 4 agreements, to paraphrase, 4 ways to live your life. And real quickly, if I could do them from memory, I'm not going to do them in the right order of the book, but be impeccable with your word, always do your best, make no assumptions, and take nothing personal. And I looked at that book and I said, all right, let me start with one, right? Four sounds so simple, but when you get into the crux of the book, it's not as simple as it sounds. And I said, which one am I most guilty of? Do I want to work on? And the one that jumped out for me was make no assumptions, right? A little backdrop, I came out of a corporate job that didn't end well. I wasn't happy. And every time I knew the phone would ring in my office, it was not going to be good news, right? And I come into this new job and the phone would ring and I'd see on the caller ID, it's the CEO, and the heart would start racing because that's how it used to be. And I was making assumptions, right? And those assumptions were no longer true. Most of the time when we make assumptions, they're not true. And that book, without, going overboard, truly has been life-changing to me, right? I work really hard to do those four things, right? To make no assumptions, to take nothing personal, to always do my best, and your best is going to be different from day to day, right? The day after surgery, my best wasn't really much, right? My best today is a little better than it was 4 weeks ago. And to be impeccable with your word, which is, some people may say, oh, that just means tell the truth. But when you break down the Latin of impeccable, it means do no harm. So it also means don't talk about people, don't spread gossip, those kinds of things. Excuse me. And I've worked really hard to follow those four agreements. And it has been life-changing. I think it's put my life, despite all the challenges of living with cancer for 11 years, I'm also able to say that these have been the best 11 years of my life because I met my wife and we got married and we have grandkids and we've been to weddings and baby births. And when I look at all the amazing things that have happened in 11 years, including the cancer, they have been, no hesitation, the best 11 years of my life. So that book, and I'm not making any commission on promoting it. I don't know the author, but it also brought to light too, and this is, I think, really relevant to today's world. When you say the whole take nothing personal, and you see what's going on in politics and on social media, I challenge anybody to tell me that people who especially, can hide behind their device and spread hate and negativity, tell me that those people are happy people. Tell me that those are people living a life filled with love and joy. And you know the answer to that, right? So what that means is, sadly, we're in a world right now with a lot of people who are really hurting and really unhappy. And the way it manifests itself is by trolling and all the stuff that we see going on. You can't tell me, pick your person. I'm not taking political sides here, but pick your person and, who behaves this way, and tell me, are they, can they possibly be living a life of joy, a life of love, and behave in that manner? And I don't think there's any way you can convince me that they are. So you don't take things personal. You don't make any assumptions. And you'll lead a happier life. I have.
Yeah, thank you. I'd forgotten. I'd read that book a good 20-something years ago. I'm going to read it again. It's such a good book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And yeah, to your point, I've just, we have a 16-year-old and we're about to be 16 and a 13-year-old. And I'm constantly telling them similar things of, look, just see what comes out of the person, whatever comes out. Remember, Wayne Dyer has this example. He says, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Orange juice, because that's what's inside. And when pressure comes up, people respond with what they have inside. And yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious to see where people are going to go with this. But I've even told people at times, because I've voted on both sides of the political spectrum over my life, And I've always just said, for me, I'm more about the person first, the party second. And admittedly, in the United States, I think we can do that because if our middle is a pretty well developed, so a middle left and a middle right is not too far apart. My wife's from Peru, my parents from Trinidad, an extreme left and an extreme right. It's a big deal. You might choose the party sometimes because it can be that big of a difference.
Sure. And I tell you, a big place that this has helped me. One of the challenges when you have the health challenges that I have is cancer patients, and anybody listening to this who's been through it knows you live your life from scan to scan, because the scan for me, which is every 3 months, tells you how things are going, right? And I see posted every day in these support groups, I have a scan next week and I'm freaking out. And we call it, there's actually a term for it called scanxiety, right? The anxiety over your next scan. And one of the things that I would say I've come close to mastering is that overcoming that scanxiety. Because what I've learned, and the book kind of helped me here, is it's making an assumption. If I'm freaking out about a test, maybe it could be a college test. In this case, we're talking about a diagnostic test. Guess what? My freaking out and having major anxiety will have, guess how much impact on the results of that scan? 0. But you know what it will do? It's going to ruin today. It's going to ruin tomorrow. And it's going to ruin every single day until I get those results. Do I want to ruin the next 7 days? That's not going to impact the results. Now, have I mastered not having a little anxiety sitting in the room waiting for the doctor to walk through the door? Haven't gotten that one down yet. But I would tell you, that I'm not going to let that ruin a great day that I could have, at work or in the evening, spending time with my wife or my family. The results are going to be what they're going to be. And the thoughts running through my head won't have any impact on those results at all. All they're going to do is ruin today and the days leading up. So, and that goes back to making assumptions. I'm assuming the results are going to be bad, that kind of thing. So,
yeah, it's funny the timing of this. I did a blood test last week, just routine blood test, did my colonoscopy thing, and that came out good, negative, clean. But then with the blood thing, I got a call yesterday. Hey, we need you to come back in and do your blood. I just did it last week. I'm like, okay. Is there something going on? Or unfortunately, the person wasn't clear enough to just simply say, oh, we lost it. Because that would have been nice to know last night. But I was like, I put it aside. And so I spoke with my daughter this morning. She said, Dad, that'd be, and I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want the family freaking out. Because again, I literally had no idea what that means. If we need to come in for more blood, or I'm not sure. And so my daughter, she said, doesn't that freak you out? I said, look, I don't know where I got this. Probably from a lot of stuff I've read. I said, but every day my heart beats and I don't beat it. So something, God, force, universe, whatever, does that. And I don't ask for that. I don't know that I deserve it or not. That's a whole different conversation, but it happens whether I try to do it or not. I said, and someday it's not gonna, no matter what the heck I try to do. I said, so in the meanwhile, kind of Serenity Prayer 101, I can't control it. So I'm not going to eat up my present moments. And just like you said, and somebody might say, wait, it's easier for you. Granted, I'm sure it was probably easier for me on that one than when you're thinking about with a scan. But again, the concept still holds. If you eat up all your moments, all you will have done is eaten up all your moments. So, wow. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So much here. So would you mind sharing, where can people learn more, Lee, about your podcast?
At wehavecancershow.com. We've got close to 200 episodes out there for anybody that's been touched by cancer in any way, whether you're a caregiver, you're a survivor, you're a patient. And I think we've probably covered almost every type of cancer out there as well. So if you or someone is looking for some information, inspiration, and hope, send them over to wehavecancershow.com, and they have quite a library to pick from.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I always, just as a side note, I always first of all, put that in the show notes, and I always put people's LinkedIn profile too, just because sometimes people hear stuff from people and they want to connect with them. So Any thoughts you'd leave the audience with before we finish?
I think we've covered it. I appreciate the opportunity, Wade, to share my why, share my story. I'm always open to connecting with folks who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. You can find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in Lee Silverstein, and that's STEIN. And more than happy to connect with anyone and help in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming out and sharing with us today,
My
Lee.
pleasure.
And for all of you listening, as always, I look forward to helping you impact more people and make more money in less time doing what you do best so you can better enjoy your family, your friends, and your life. Thanks so much for listening.